So the first question is kind of a softball. Can you describe your journey to your current leadership position in the college, and then what leadership roles and experiences shaped your path?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, as you may know, or hopefully know, I'm the vice president for student affairs at Valencia College. I've been in this role for just a little over a year. I started in June of 2022. And so pretty new here to Valencia in this role. Prior to that, I was a vice president for student services at Lincoln Land Community College in Springfield, Illinois for 11 and a half years. Prior to that, I was a dean of students at McHenry County College up in Crystal Lake, Illinois. And then prior to that, I was director of like admissions, registration, enrollment services type role. I don't remember my exact title. Up in Wisconsin at a technical college at Waukesha County Technical College outside of Milwaukee. I was at WCTC for about 5.5 years. I Prior to moving into that role, so I've been in student life. Like that's my origin story, is in student life and res life. I've always worked in community colleges. I've through sort of my own personal journey to access education as a lower income first generation student. My path started at a community college, and by happenstance ended up in graduate school in a student personnel program, and I had no idea what that was. I went there for the graduate assistantship in the campus recreation department, and thought I was going to be majoring in like, sports management or recreation administration, and they didn't have such a program, and I ended up in a student personnel administration program, and it helped me kind of connect my experience as a first generation college student who had been at a community college and had been disengaged and a little disenfranchised along the way, and helped me understand kind of my journey. And so I kind of lit a passion for me. And so from that, right out of graduate school, my first job was actually at a community college, and I haven't looked back since. That's all the only type of institution I've ever had an interest in working at, and I don't foresee an opportunity where that would ever change. But I started out in residence life and student life, and doing some of that work, and then transitioned into full student life and student activities kinds of opportunities, and went to Wisconsin to WCTC in that role, in a student life role. And I was really burnt out. And I had a supervisor, well, actually it was my supervisor's supervisor, the vice president was new. And she was one of those folks that really, I think, could see potential in people and see those transferable skills, kind of like you were talking about a little bit. And did the, I think you got talent, kid, sort of thing. And was like, how would you like to try something different? Because I was at a place where I was like, I can't do one more student government training. I'm gonna like stab my eye out or something at that point. And so I had an opportunity to move into a different role, and I was in that role for only about 6 months. And then she came back to me and was like, hey, how would you like to be our director of admissions, recruitment, and enrollment services? And I was like, I don't really know how to do any of that, but okay. And so that kind of started my journey, a little bit into where I am now. I feel like was really the jump start, to give me some broad experience in enrollment services and admissions and some of those really key and critical areas that are the backbone of student affairs. And then as I moved into that dean of students role at McHenry County College, I took on additional responsibilities for athletics and financial aid and some other areas and advising that weren't in my portfolio at WCTC. And then that, of course, grew when I went to Lincoln Land and included other things that, things like our Center for Academic Success. We had TRIO programs and other kinds of programs that, I didn't have at McHenry County College. And then now certainly at Valencia, my portfolio has expanded even more. So that's kind of, my journey of moving from, one institution to another, and then, one sort of role and focus to kind of where I'm at now more broadly as a vice president for student affairs.
What kind of specific leadership qualities do you believe have been crucial in your rise to your current position? And then I know this is a two-part,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you have to answer both, but
Yeah.
how do these things influence your decision-making
Sure,
interaction?
sure. Yeah, so I think, in terms of leadership qualities, I mean, God, that could be literally anything, right? I think, being a good communicator, being able, and I think some of them also depends on the level that you're at, right? Like, when I was in that role with enrollment services and admissions and recruitment and those kinds of things, like, being a good communicator, helping create a clear project plan, like how do we get this done? Ensuring that we're kind of aligning resources, and so knowing what resources are needed and aligning that in a way that kind of leverages your ability to do your job. But then as you kind of move through various levels, right, then those leadership qualities, I think they change a little bit, right? Communication is still important, but then you're communicating more about a vision, right? Like, how do you help sort of like cast a vision and create that ownership and buy-in of your team and help them understand the direction that you're going? How do you again assess all the needs of your team to ensure that again that you're creating an environment where they have the resources they need to do their work? And so that's really understanding deeply the work, for the areas that I think you have leadership for. It's building trust, right? Like sometimes it's like a trust fall, right? Like, trust me, like we need to do this thing. And getting people to do a new thing, or something that's very different from maybe what they've been doing. It is like a trust fall. And so, building that trust along the way where you can say, I got you, I'll catch you, don't worry, I think is really important. And so I think those are kinds of really critical. And I think just integrity, right? And I define integrity as, and I was going to talk about this, when you talk about the leadership style, but it's like, again, knowing the values that matter to you, and so I talk a lot about honesty, integrity, loyalty, and passion. And when I talk about honesty and integrity, it's like honesty is it's truth in words, and integrity is truth in action. And I think that matters, right? Is that your actions, match your words. And that's, I think, particularly at a vice president level, if I'm saying one thing and doing something else, that will completely undermine my credibility. And so I think that in particular, I think is really important in terms of a leadership quality. And the last one that I often talk about with folks when I'm mentoring them and talking about leadership and growing kind of in their roles, is dealing with ambiguity. Like rarely, in the last 11 and a half years that I was at Lincoln Land and now does, the president come to me and say, I want you to do this thing and here's how I want you to do it, by whatever. Like, they're just like, go do a thing. And then it's like, okay, I don't know. And I go do a thing, right? And it's like you
Oh,
figure out
good.
how to do it.
I'm not the only one then. Okay.
No, not at all. Not at all, right? And so, and I don't want them to tell me how to, I mean, that's why they have me, right? And that's why I have a team, is like, we're the experts in doing the thing, whatever the thing is. But there is often a lot of ambiguity about direction and things like that. And unknowns. And I just think that that's really critical. Like, you just have to kind of get comfortable in that, that you're not always going to have all the answers. It's not always going to be perfect. And how do you live within that sort of gray space, I think is really, really critical, to be an effective leader.
Okay, so how would you define your leadership style? And
Yeah.
again, you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but can you
Yeah.
give me examples where your leadership style has been effective?
Yeah. And I think, again, I always, talk about, that I feel like I have an authentic leadership style, and that defining that is, for me, is really being true to myself and the principles that guide me, right? And being very clear about that so that folks know kind of where I'm coming from and what matters. And so, I do talk a lot about, again, integrity, honesty, loyalty, and passion. And those things matter to me. And I talk about it a lot. And when I talk about loyalty, it's not necessarily loyal to me. Like, I don't want undying loyalty. That's not what I'm saying. But I want loyalty to the work that we're doing, to our mission, to the ways in which we serve our students. And that's how I talk about loyalty, is really loyalty to that mission, because I feel like that is so critical, to really getting people to the why. Like, why are we doing the work that we do? And at Lincoln Land, I had this huge whiteboard in my office, and in the middle of it, in big giant red letters, I wrote, what's in the best interest of our students, and had a big circle around it. And when I first started there and I first started, asking when folks would come to me and, we'd had all these conversations. And I'm like, well, what's in the best interest of our students? How does this align with mission? Like they were just like, oh, whatever. And then, later as they kind of got more, like, so this is how we think it's in the best interest of our students. And this is where it aligns to mission. When I left, my staff asked for me to take a picture next to my whiteboard pointing at what's in the best interest of our students, so that they could all have one. So I think those things matter to our teams in terms of how we kind of lead out loud, and help them see our vision and the work that we do and why it matters. So I think that's how I would define my leadership style. I think, one of the things that I think would be an example of my leadership style, well, I think a perfect example. So I had an opportunity at Lincoln Land for a short period of time, work with our campus police department. We had a transition of another cabinet level member, and I was asked to take on some temporary responsibilities for our police department. And again, I just embedded them right in my team, right? Like, you're going to do all the same things the rest of my team's doing. And they got really into it, like they felt so connected and engaged with our work and kind of understanding their purpose and how it relates and how important their role is, right? Not only just for safety, but often campus police are the first person that a student will run into when they're coming on campus, and helping that, being clear about that and talking about the ways in which their roles tie into the mission of our work, provided them a clarity that they had never really had. And so when the time came, when they hired the other cabinet level member that they were going to report back to, they went to the president and asked to stay in student affairs, because they felt so engaged and a part of the work that we were doing in student affairs and at the college, quite honestly. And so I think that is a reflection of leadership, and sort of like, again, leading out loud in the sense of being clear about your mission and your passion and the things that matter to you. And that kind of resonated with that team in terms of changing their philosophy of work, and how they approach their job on a day-to-day basis.
So what strategies or approaches do you employ to foster collaboration and teamwork within your college?
Yeah, I think, part of it is getting the work out at what I would call the lowest level possible, right? I think in that sense, it's, if we have a project, like, I'm just trying to think, like right now, like we have an orientation redesign project happening. I could easily assign a whole bunch of deans to that, right, across the college, academic deans and deans from student affairs and so on. But they're not the ones delivering orientation, right? Like, so they need to have some representation, but we need people at some of those lowest levels that are boots on the ground, that are working day to day, that have that really invaluable sort of insight about how our students experience our processes and our systems and the things that we do. And so I think involving folks at that level does a number of things. One, it sends a message that you value their input, and that they're part of the team. And I think that is so powerful when you get that happening at different levels within an organization, where they feel ownership. They're not just being told what to do, they're helping decide what to do. And I think that's super powerful in terms of collaboration. So I think that's one thing. Also, again, I think it sends a message that everybody's expected to contribute, and I think that's really important as well. As we think about teamwork, it's like you can't sit around and hope that everybody else makes the decision. That there's an expectation that everybody is going to be involved, from time to time in decisions that will impact the work that they're doing. And a lot of times we say that, but then we don't actually do that by involving those folks. And so I think those are some ways that I have found that are really powerful in building that deep trust in the organization, because that also sends a message about trust, that I trust the folks that are on the front lines that are working directly with students in orientation. I trust that they know what they're doing, because I'm valuing their opinion and putting them on this work team to redesign this thing to create an even better experience for our students, right? And so I think those are a lot of ways to kind of create teamwork. And I think sometimes too, putting using sort of the naive approach, where it's like, when you don't know, and asking questions, or putting folks into groups where they can learn is also a great way to kind of build team. So again, they feel like they're being valued enough to go be a part of this thing that they don't know about, but they have an opportunity to contribute in some way, and then bring that back to the team, building their level of expertise in areas outside of maybe their day-to-day work. So I think those are some really powerful strategies that I've used over time to kind of build, collaboration and teamwork. And I think also, and this is going to be a little more of a goofy example, but I think they have to see you as a human, as a leader, right? And so one of the things that I did at Lincoln Land we were closed on Fridays in the summer. And on Thursday, after usually around like 1 o'clock, 12, 1 o'clock, I would walk around. So I would usually make a run to the grocery store, and I would fill up a cooler with ice cream sandwiches and popsicles. And I would literally walk around campus with a cooler on a cart, and I would be handing out my team and any other team members that I would run into, college folks, and just talk with them and give them an ice cream bar on a hot Thursday afternoon, so that they got to see me as a person and as a human. We did goofy event, like we had tropical Thursdays on occasion, about once a month, where everybody would wear Hawaiian shirts on Thursdays. And it was just a way to kind of build that team and create a sense of unity and fun, that we weren't just there to make the widgets, but we were there, that I respected them as humans and people, and that they could see me as a human and a person. And I think that's really critical as well.
Can you tell me about a time where you faced a complex challenge, and in that challenge, how did you use your leadership style or any skills that you have gained to kind of help navigate and resolve that? Like you were like, yeah, I really did a good job there. This is
Yeah. Well, I think you just sort of being anywhere in the state of Florida right now is a case study of that. And I don't know how plugged in you are to the news and all the things that are happening here in Florida, in the state of Florida, in our education system. But the governor and the legislature, which is a supermajority in the same party as our governor, has passed all sorts of anti-DEI laws, anti-LGBTQ plus laws, what he calls anti-woke laws, and all kinds of things that are impacting our students and our employees in all kinds of unimaginable ways. And so it's sort of like coming at us from all fronts, right? It's impacting our students, our community, our employees, ourselves. For many of us, the things that are happening are deeply impacting us on a personal level. And while that's happening, trying to lead our teams, right? And so it is a really a complex situation we find ourselves in here in Florida. And I have probably one of the most diverse teams at the college in student affairs, which is generally the case, it seems like. So I have folks from every race and ethnicity across the spectrum in terms of gender identity, folks that have kids that are trans, and now they're not sure how they're going to get health care. We have undocumented students that are scared to tell us that they're undocumented for fear that they're going to get deported or worse. Who knows? Can't access health care here in the system anymore. Just all kinds of really, really awful things happening here in the state of Florida. And so, yeah, you wonder how you don't curl up in a ball and die every day or something. But I think knowing that just how complex this is, it's really, for me, the way that I've been approaching it again is being sort of authentic and open, right? And talking about that this impacts me personally, so I get it, right? I get it at a very personal level, and being open about, my frustration and the hurt that I feel, and trying to think through. Again, it gets back to that ambiguity, right? It's kind of like in the federal financial aid world, like there's regulations, but then there's also sort of the gray area, the professional judgment. How do we interpret this kind of thing? And that's the space we're in right now. And so it's trying to thread that needle of, yes, we're fulfilling the obligations of whatever legislation was passed, and also interpreting that in a way that we are doing that in the best interest of our students and the best interest of our team members, and trying to create the spaces and places that allow them to be who they are without feeling unsafe, on our campus. And that's particularly important for our students, is trying to create that sense of safety and place for them in this world right now down here that is just so out of control. And so it's trying to create that sense of vision and purpose. Like, how do we continue to do this work under those conditions? We talk a lot, and I talk a lot about, and we literally can't use words diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, that is like, it's outlaw business right there. And so, the work that we do is still central to our mission. Like, our mission hasn't changed. And so I try to continue to be mission centric and student centric, while recognizing that, my team members and other folks at the college, myself included, are being personally impacted by this legislation. And so I think, again, it's, leading with heart, leading with authenticity, being honest, kind of being clear about, like, well, this is a limit, or that's not really a clear defined limit, so here's what we can do. And again, keeping that mission in front of our team members in particular, to say we're still doing good work, right? Like, that hasn't changed. Like, we can maybe not use certain words, but we're still doing really good work. We're still serving undocumented students. We're still serving students from the GLBT community. We're still serving, Black and Hispanic students. Like, none of those things change. And so it's really trying to recenter our team and keep us focused really on kind of the goal at hand, our mission. And so that is, I think, a way that I've dealt with this particular complex situation that we find ourselves in here in Florida.
You had talked about, as far as qualities of leaders, good communication. And so can you speak about that a little bit? How do you ensure, like, that all of the people that you need to are, you're transparent and you're open and you're being able to communicate that?
Yeah, a year and a half ago, I'd have answered this question really differently. A year and a half ago, I had 100 people and I knew everybody's name. I have over 500, almost 600 people on my team. I've been here a year and a half, and there's some of them I've never met. I don't know their names in some cases. Like, many of them I do now, but there's staff I don't know their name. And that is, it's so foreign to me. Like, I've never worked at an institution this big. We have 7 campuses across 2 counties, serving 45,000 students a semester. Like, it's nuts, and so for me, the ways in which I communicated and worked with my team, like, every morning when I was at Lincoln Land, every single morning at 8 a.m., I would make a quick scan around the departments, check in, what's going on, how are you doing, how was that graduation, that thing, whatever, making those personal connections with staff. I had, obviously weekly team meetings, and, I had monthly division meetings where all my folks would come in person, and, all those kinds of things, right? Regular communications about email, so on. So I felt, obviously, in that environment, a smaller environment, it's a lot easier to communicate. Here with 45,000 students and 500, almost 600 employees, I can't walk around to every office at 8 a.m. in the morning on 7 campuses across 2 counties. Like that just doesn't work, right? And so honestly, it's been a challenge, like figuring out what works. It's like I can send out regular email updates, like this is what's happening. I communicate with my leadership team in hopes that they're communicating with their leadership teams who are, communicating with their leadership teams. But that's the telephone game, right? Like the little can, like the message changes along the way. We have an activity hour on Friday mornings at 8. And so I frequently have division-wide meetings via Zoom, unfortunately, but it's like, how do you get 600? We don't even have a room that fits 600 people. So it's like, how would you get 600 people in a room? So those are all Zooms. So I get to see, people in little square boxes, and I can't even see all the little boxes because there's so many on the call. So it's really has changed the way in which I communicate. And I gotta say, I'm still struggling. Like I would say, if you ask me like, what's the hardest thing right now? It's trying to figure out how to really effectively communicate with the team in ways that they understand, that feels personal, that they can connect to. I'm still struggling with that one here, a year into this job, trying to find what's going to work. Doing all the things, have meetings, like I said, send out emails, but creating team sites and SharePoint sites and, whatever, you do all the things, but it's still hard to make 600 people feel connected and communicated with, and feel like they own, this work that we're doing, through those communications.
Mentoring and developing future leaders are essential for the long-term success of an institution. So how do you approach mentorship? And you talked about it a little bit, and leadership development within your college. And can you share an experience where leadership has had a lasting impact on an emerging leader?
Yeah. I feel lucky in that I have had a lot of really good mentors in my lifetime. So not even just as a professional, but in my lifetime. And particularly the woman that I mentioned earlier, that when I transitioned out of student life into kind of admissions and enrollment services and that sort of thing, she was a mentor for me for sure. And really saw potential in me and helped me grow, I think, more exponentially in a very short amount of time than probably anybody that I've had an opportunity to work with. But her in particular, I think, she was a really critical mentor in helping me sort of figure out how to lead at that next level. And so that was really important. And then, I've had additional mentors along the way. And just a random story, I'll tell you, I had an opportunity to interact with, sort of randomly, the president at Nashville State Community College in Nashville. And it was a very sort of, it was in a large setting, like it wasn't a personal sort of thing, but I felt a real connection with, like, I like the way she led, and just like, I was like, wow, like I want to be her when I grow up, that kind of thing. This was like 5 years ago. And so afterwards I just called her and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, and we met. I'm wondering if you would be interested in and available to mentor me. I'm like, I would like to learn from you, and that was I felt like that was like I was asking somebody out on a date or something, right? Like it's like the fear of rejection, that kind of thing. And she was like, absolutely. Like she was so gracious, and we meet and talk. I was actually in Nashville for a conference this summer. We had dinner and spent a couple hours together, and we meet online every, month or two for an hour or so, and just kind of talk about leadershipy type stuff. And she's been like a really great resource for me. And so, I've had that opportunity. And so part of my, I guess, fabric is to give back in that same way. And kind of coming up through student life, like you really develop, I think, in those kinds of roles, a real appreciation for leadership development and growth, and senior students grow and learn. And that really transitioned to the way in which I lead my teams, is that leadership and leadership development and growth for my team members, and really identifying people that have potential and that want to grow and are curious and inquisitive, and want to get out there and they want to do big things, like finding those people and helping them grow. So I've, kind of officially and unofficially mentored people. Like I've been through part of the NASPA program. They do NASPA is the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators. They have a mentoring program for young professionals, and I've done that a few times with some people that I know. Like they go through the program and then they have to have a mentor, and so I've served in that role. But I think probably the mentee that I might be most proud of and excited about, when I was at McHenry County College, I hired a person that was our new student life person. It's kind of almost like a little mini me situation. So she got hired in their student life, and she was just like kick ass. Like she was so good, and I was just like, wow, like she has so much potential beyond this role. Like she was just a really good leader. She had a great communication style. She was a good thinker. She figured out, how things connected across the college, and was really a great collaborator and bringing folks in. And people wanted to join, right? Like she was like just one of those magnetic people. And so she was just fantastic. And so I just helped her get connected with leadership development opportunities, growth opportunities. After I left Lincoln Land, she left and she actually went down to Tennessee to one of the colleges down there. And then she returned to McHenry County College as the vice president of student affairs there a few years ago. In fact, she also completed the doctoral program at Ferris. She was in, I forget which cohort, she was in 6 or something like that. So she has so much potential. She's young, energetic, charismatic, hardworking, smart, like all the things. And I have no doubt she is going to be a college president when she's ready. She could do it tomorrow if she wanted to. And she is a rock star. And I don't say those things lightly. Like I don't go around calling people rock stars like a lot of people do. But she's literally a rock star. And she is absolutely killing it in her role, and she's passing it on too. Like she's done the same kinds of things with some team members. And so she is I think, one of the folks that I've had an opportunity to be a part of their journey. And I feel like the sky's the limit for her. She'll go wherever she wants to go, whenever she's ready to do it.
So looking ahead, what do you believe are the most important leadership challenges that colleges will face?
Yeah. One of the things we're talking about at Valencia, and I suspect other folks are seeing it too, is I'm going to call it the stunted social emotional growth of our traditional age students that were, in school for, years, potentially 3-4 years, maybe. And it was primarily virtual. Right. And it's interesting kind of what we're seeing. Students feel isolated. They don't have friends. They're not sure how to make friends. It's a different, coming from student life, and kind of having that experience, like knowing what I knew about that life and those students, and what that was like whenever, our students aren't like that now. And so I think that is an issue that we have to figure out, is how to create opportunities to help our students understand how to engage, why they should engage, helping them feel connected, creating that sticky campus where they want to be there, and don't feel so isolated in their existence. The other issue, and I think it's somewhat perhaps related, is all of the complexity of our students' lives, right? They're working, they have family, we have oodles and gobs of students that have sibling care responsibilities, or parental care or elder care responsibilities, and they're trying to work and go to school and take care of their little sister on the weekends, and they have to stay with grandma at night during the week, and whatever, right? And it's just a very complicated existence, and they're stressed out and anxious about all of it. And they don't have enough resources. And so I think trying to meet students' basic needs, whether that's, mental health support or food insecurity or transportation, or all childcare, whatever those things are, that are kind of impacting those students, kind of complicating their lives. I think that is a big issue we're going to have to figure out, because they don't leave that stuff at the door. They come to our campuses as their whole selves, whatever that is. And if we're expecting them to be successful in the classroom, we have to figure out ways to help them address those other issues. We say at Valencia, like, if you look at our strategic plan, right square in the middle of it, there's a yellow, where all the little Venn circles kind of cross. It says creating the right conditions. And our big idea at Valencia is that any student can succeed under the right conditions. And that's what we try to do, and we strive to do, is to create the right conditions for our students. And so, it's some of that's, it's the holistic support, right? It's not necessarily the academic support, it's all the other stuff that's really derailing them from getting to class on time, or being prepared in class, or staying awake in class, or whatever it may be. So I think that's the basic needs issue is another one. And then I think just the legislative onslaught that is impacting our colleges from every direction, right? Whether it's, in Democratic leaning states, coming from Illinois, like, oh my God, it's like it's like all this like open access. Every high school student has to complete the FAFSA before they graduate high school, and like whatever. Like, they're all well-meaning, I guess. But there's just, then it's like you're dealing with these legislative mandates, many of which are unfunded. And then you have states like here in Florida, and others that are passing these really mean-spirited laws that are impacting some of our most vulnerable and marginalized students and employees, for that matter. And that's impacting the way in which we can do our work. And so I think that legislative impact is huge. And gonna only get worse, right? Like, there's just so much focus, it seems like, on higher education, and just education in general, I think, actually, right now. So I think that those are the three that I would say.